It's my responsibility, I explained to my sister Maria when she questioned my growing appetite. The customers trust us. One bad batch could ruin everything we've built. Just small bites, I told myself as I sampled the morning's first batch of conchas. Just enough to ensure perfection. This is story of how I gained 600 pounds after my family opened a bakery business and made me the manager. The morning sun cast golden rays through the pristine windows of Esperanza Bakery as my family gathered for our grand opening. I stood behind the counter, my lean 150-pound frame buzzing with nervous energy. At 28, I had been designated the official taster, a title that seemed more honorary than serious at the time. "Remember, mijo," my grandmother whispered, pressing a worn recipe card into my palm. "The secret is in the proportion. Too much of anything ruins the magic." The aroma of fresh-baked bread filled the air as the first customers began to line up outside. I watched through the glass as the crowd grew, drawn by whispers of our family's legendary recipe, one that had been passed down through 3 generations but never shared beyond our kitchen walls. Just small bites, I told myself as I sampled the morning's first batch of conchas. Just enough to ensure perfection. But as the day wore on, and customer after customer praised our bread with near-religious fervor, I found myself reaching for just one more taste, again and again. The sweetness seemed to dissolve my willpower along with the sugar on my tongue. By closing time, I had consumed what I estimated to be 3 full pastries worth of samples. My stomach felt uncomfortably full, but the satisfaction on customers' faces made it seem worthwhile. That night, as I locked up the bakery, I caught my reflection in the glass window. The fluorescent lights from inside cast harsh shadows, and for a moment I could swear my shirt looked tighter across my chest. I tugged at the fabric, feeling the buttons strain in a way they never had before. Standing alone in the darkened street, I pressed my hand to my stomach and whispered to my reflection, "What's happening to me?" 3 months later, Esperanza Bakery had become the talk of the neighborhood. Lines formed before dawn, and I had settled into a routine of meticulous quality control that required me to sample every batch, every flavor, every experimental creation my family developed. "It's my responsibility," I explained to my sister Maria when she questioned my growing appetite. "The customers trust us. One bad batch could ruin everything we've built." But I knew the truth was more complicated. What had started as professional duty had evolved into something I couldn't quite name. The bread called to me throughout the day. The crusty sourdough that emerged from the oven at 6 a.m., the cinnamon rolls that needed testing at noon, the experimental flavors that demanded my attention in the afternoon. My weight had climbed steadily into the 200s, then the 300s. My belt, once worn on the second notch, now strained at the last one. Staff members exchanged glances when they thought I wasn't looking, and my mother had started making comments about maybe taking a break from tasting. But the business was thriving. Every day brought new customers, new orders, new reasons to celebrate our success. And celebration, I reasoned, required sacrifice. Late one Thursday evening, after the last customer had left and the staff had gone home, I found myself alone with the day's remaining inventory. I told myself I was just securing the building, just making sure everything was properly stored, but my hands moved with practiced precision to the shelf, where the day's unsold artisan loaves waited. In the darkness of the closed bakery, illuminated only by the green glow of the exit sign, I tore into a loaf of olive bread with my bare hands. The silence amplified every sound, the tearing of crust, my increasingly labored breathing, the creak of my belt fighting against my expanding waist. I ate mechanically, desperately, as if the bread contained something essential I couldn't get anywhere else. When the loaf was gone, I stood in the darkness, crumbs scattered across my straining shirt. My hands were trembling, and suddenly the room began to spin. I gripped the counter for support, my heart racing, and whispered into the empty bakery, "What have I become?" By my first anniversary as official taster, I had transformed into someone I barely recognized. The scale at my doctor's office had registered 450 pounds at my last visit, a number that seemed impossible until I saw it with my own eyes. Dr. Rodriguez had been blunt. "Carlos, your job is killing you. Your blood pressure, your blood sugar, your joints, everything is breaking down. You need to make a choice." But how could I explain that walking away felt like abandoning my family's dreams? Esperanza Bakery had become a neighborhood institution, We'd opened a second location. My parents had paid off their mortgage. My sister had been able to quit her night job. I moved through my days like a giant navigating a world built for smaller people. Simple tasks had become monumental efforts. Climbing the stairs to the office left me breathless. Standing for more than 20 minutes made my back ache. Yet every morning, I reported for duty, sample spoon in hand. The tasting had evolved beyond quality control into something resembling a ritual. I no longer tasted with the discerning palate of a professional. I consumed with the desperate hunger of someone trying to fill an unfillable void. My family had started holding meetings without me, speaking in hushed tones that stopped when I entered a room. I suspected they were discussing my situation, but pride prevented me from confronting them directly. One Tuesday morning, during a meeting with potential investors for our third location, I attempted to rise from my chair to shake hands with the visitors. The wooden chair, which had supported me faithfully for months, suddenly gave way with a sharp crack that echoed through the conference room. The sound seemed to freeze time. I found myself on the floor, surrounded by splintered wood, while 6 pairs of eyes stared in stunned silence. The investors exchanged glances. My father's face flushed with embarrassment. My mother's eyes filled with tears. As I struggled to my feet, my shirt riding up to expose my massive belly to the room, I realized that my secret was no longer secret. The room remained silent as I brushed sawdust from my clothes and mumbled an apology. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I stared at my reflection and wondered if there was any part of the man I used to be left inside this body. The question that haunted me wasn't whether I could change. It was whether I even wanted to. At 600 pounds, I had become a prisoner of my own success. The Mendoza family empire now included 4 locations, a catering business and a cookbook deal. My name appeared on every menu as Master Taster, a title that had become both my greatest achievement and my heaviest burden. The morning routine that once brought me joy now felt like an elaborate form of self-destruction. I would arrive at the flagship bakery before dawn, wheeled to my specially reinforced tasting station, where I would methodically work my way through the day's offerings. What had once been careful, considered sampling had devolved into compulsive consumption that I disguised as professional dedication. My mobility had become severely limited. A custom wheelchair accommodated my size for longer distances, while a walker helped me navigate shorter ones. The stairs to my childhood bedroom had become impassable, forcing me to convert the bakery's storage room into a makeshift living space. Dr. Rodriguez had stopped mincing words. "Carlos, you're approaching the point where intervention may not be possible. Your organs are failing. Your heart can't sustain this much longer." But every conversation about stepping back from tasting duties triggered panic in me that felt existential. Who would ensure the quality that had built our reputation? Who understood the family recipes with my precision? Who would be the guardian of our grandmother's secret proportions? My family had grown increasingly desperate. Maria had researched weight loss programs and intervention specialists. My parents had consulted with lawyers about restructuring the business to remove my tasting responsibilities. Even the staff had begun intercepting some of the food before it reached my station, though I always noticed and demanded my full samples. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday evening in October. I had stayed late to sample a new line of holiday pastries, alone in the bakery as had become my custom. The comfort of solitude allowed me to eat without the weight of worried glances from family and staff. As I reached for my 7th experimental pumpkin Danish, my hand stopped mid-air. In the reflection of the bakery's front window, illuminated by the street lamp outside, I saw not the dedicated professional I told myself I was, but a man consumed by the very thing I claimed to control. The Danish felt impossibly heavy in my trembling hand. Around me, the bakery that had once represented my family's dreams now felt like a beautiful prison. The smell of cinnamon and yeast, once intoxicating, now seemed cloying and oppressive. I set down the pastry and stared at my reflection. Distorted, massive, barely recognizable as the lean young man who had accepted the title of official taster just 2 years earlier. My breathing was labored from the simple act of sitting upright. My heart pounded with the effort of existing in my transformed body. For the first time in months, the compulsion to eat warred with a deeper, more desperate need. The need to reclaim some piece of myself before it was too late. Standing slowly, using the counter for support, I whispered to my reflection in the glass, my voice barely audible above the hum of the refrigeration units. Do I save the business? Or myself? The question hung in the air like the scent of tomorrow's bread, waiting for an answer that would determine not just my future, but my survival.